Professor Bahmed from Mohammed V University, Professor Marwan Zakhir from Shuaib Dukali University, and Professor Jmati from Ajminul Campus Ibn Zor University, and Professor Ilkhaima Rashid from Hassan II University. Welcome. You will take each 15 minutes for the presentation, and we'll take at the end 15 minutes for discussion. So we will start with the first presenter, Professor Marwan Zakhir, who will be talking on language education reforms in Morocco, achievements and challenges. The floor is yours, Professor Zakhir.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. Before I start, allow me to thank the organizing committee for accepting my proposal to participate with eminent researchers on a topic which really concerns us all, education and languages in Morocco. I'd like first to thank some of the leading figures of this university, Professor Karim Ben Soukas, who was my supervisor, and I'd like also to thank some professors who helped me in a way or another to finish my studies here in Rabat. My paper is entitled Language Education Reforms in Morocco, Achievement and Challenges. Well, as we know, the Moroccan education system has witnessed a number of reforms which influenced the status of languages since the Declaration of Independence. And of course, these reforms had a tremendous impact on our ways of teaching languages and our choice of languages. So this paper will critically synopsize the different phases of language education reforms, trying to focus on the major eras which marked a turning point in the development of language policy in Morocco. Then it will try to give an overview of the major practitioners intervening with the implementation of the official language policy of the state. I will try with an introduction to set the scene of the study, then discuss a bit about language policy in Morocco, and give an overview of the recent reforms, namely the National Charter for Education, the LMD system, the bachelor system, and the new reform of 2023. Then I'll try to discuss the role of major institutions here in Morocco, those we believe are responsible on taking decisions concerning language policy, the Higher Council of Education, the Institute of Arabization, and the ERCAM. Then I'll provide a humble model which I believe more democratic in managing the languages existing in our country. After independence, Morocco aimed to rearrange the linguistic scene by depriving the country from the French dominance and giving a chance to the local languages to flourish in education, administration, and the public sphere. So there was a heated debate on the choice of the language of the state. Traditionalists defended Arabization in education and administration. Nationalists supported the project and considered it the right choice to preserve local identity. And bureaucrats showed moderate views in adopting Arabization and favored French in technical education. Modernists, on the other hand, criticized the project and supported French. They thought that Arabic was responsible on many issues in education in Morocco, so they favored French. Imazighan, on the other hand, showed negative views on Arabization and believed that it's the reason behind the decline of the Amazigh project since the Declaration of Independence. So we can differentiate between three different eras in the development of language policy in Morocco: the pre-colonial era, the dominance of Arabic and Islamic studies, at the time, before the pre-colonial era, there was a traditional educational system, and priority was given to Arabic, Islamic jurisprudence, and philosophy. Within the colonial era, there was an introduction of French. I'm not going to go deep into the evolution of languages or language policy, since Professor Belhia has already tackled the issue. So I'll go in brief on all this. Then within the colonial era, as I said, there was a kind of French dominance on the country, on all active sectors of the country: education, administration, and economy. After the departure of the French administration, a partial Arabization was adopted in the country. But due to the decrease in standards of education, some ministers, like Ben Hima, for example, decided to go back to French and make a pause in Arabization development. And after the present time, as we know, we are using Arabic just in high school, and French is reserved to university, technical universities and science universities. Concerning Amazigh development, there was no debate on Amazigh at the time of the, pre-colonial era. Amazigh was used just like a traditional language, a folklore in Amazighophone closures. But with the French protectorate, such debate on Amazigh right in teaching their children language, or in their own language, start to appear and take place within the public sphere. The French administration decided to create the Amazigh French Institute to teach Amazigh children in their own language. Then, with the time of King Hassan II, there was a proclamation that Amazigh should be taught like other languages. But up to the 19th, the development of Amazigh was very slow due to different political and linguistic tensions. Then Amazigh had to wait till the reformed constitution of 2011, where His Majesty King Mohammed VI declared that Amazigh has to be taught just like other official language, Arabic, in all Moroccan schools. And he also gave his orders to build the Erkam Institute to take research on Amazigh language. Concerning the spread of English in Morocco, we can say that just after the globalization spread in northern Africa, English started to creep in society, due to these technical devices students use, but it's still used within an academic sphere. And the number of students enrolled in English department is increasing day by day or year by year. Moreover, we notice that families start to, give a kind of importance to English by enrolling their children in English institutes, because they believe it's the language of future concerning the learning of sciences at university. Now we do have all these languages, but the big question is how to manage all these languages. There is no harm in having a lot of languages in country, for example, but the question is how to manage all these languages. Moroccan Ministry of Education took different reforms, where language was, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. The National Charter for Education, for example, aims, among many things, to reform the language policy of the education system and provided a set of articles that identify the main functions of languages within the school curricula. The Article 110 states that Arabic is the official language of the state, and it is a reinforcement, or its reinforcement and use in all domains of science and life was and is still a national aim. Amazigh was barely mentioned in the charter in an obscure way, and we noticed that the maximum of articles used in the charter were reserved to foreign languages, particularly French. In 2008, the Ministry of Education decided to reform the Charter of Education, or rectify some of the mistakes which took place in the Charter of Education. And it devotes one of the chapters in the emergency plan to the development of languages, teaching, and urges teachers to use new approaches and materials in teaching languages. It also urges teachers to support creativity and educational research in the field of languages learning, improve their pedagogical techniques and teaching methods, and use audiovisual and digital materials which are necessary for teaching and learning languages. Organize cultural, artistic, and educational activities to develop language learning. The LMD reform, or system, which took place in 2003, was adopted to ease students and teachers' mobility to Western universities. And among its objectives, we find promoting linguistic competency of learners, improve the standards of education and achievements, meet the socioeconomic and cultural needs of the country, and improve methodological, linguistic, and communicational capacities of students. But the problem with the bachelor system, which took place in 2022, we had a new architecture in education used by the Minister Amzazi to reinforce soft skills and meet the jobs market's requirements. The reform aimed to offer students a multidisciplinary education and the spirit of motivation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And English, for the first time, was planned as a major module in 4 semesters of the BA level. But unfortunately, the bachelor had to stop after 1 semester, and the future of 2,300 students was in a total obscurity, where they had to convert to the LMD system. Okay. The new reform of 2023, the current Minister Merawi is preparing for a new reform which is said to be more ambitious. The reform emanates from the report on sustainable development by Shakib bin Musa, and it will translate the government's recommendations on the development of the human capital. The minister criticized the current status of languages in the Moroccan university and promised to devote 30% of the curricula to the linguistic skills, particularly English. So, as we see, there is no consistency in the choice of languages within all these reforms of education. So now we'll try to see who takes decision in Morocco, and how can we have a kind of a democratic management of languages existing in the country. Because sometimes we see as if the Ministry of Education does not have a clear view on the right language policy of the state, as if we are just choosing. Every minister has his own project in advancing one language over the other. So we'll see the role of official councils and language institutes in Morocco. The Higher Council of Education, Training and Scientific Research. It is an independent advisory body which consists of stakeholders, social actors, and experts in education. It seeks
Please
to
note, you have 2
enlighten.
minutes to conclude.
Yeah. It seeks to enlighten decision makers, actors, and public opinion through quantitative and qualitative evaluation of the various components of education, training, and scientific research system. The Institute of Arabization was created to update Arabic tools and make it sustainable for modern education. It aims to adapt the language to the requirement of education administration and job market. And it collaborates with universities here in Morocco, but there is no contact or kind of collaboration between the Institute of Arabization and the Higher Council of Education, or the ERCAM. The ERCAM was established with a royal decree, and it has its full financial independence. Its mission is to preserve and promote Amazigh culture in society by giving opinions on ways to advance it in all sectors. Again, the ERCAM collaborates with institutes and universities here in Morocco and outside, but there is no contact between the Institute of Arabization and the ERCAM, or the Higher Council of Education. So I think that we can try to remanage the entire linguistic scene by working on making the role of each institution clearer than it is. For example, the Higher Council of Languages and Culture, which is not up to the present time, it is still just a dream, which could play a decisive role in managing languages in the country. For example, the Higher Council of Languages and Cultures could collaborate with the Institute of Arabization and the ERCAM, okay, in terms of scientific research, and how, brief, this is the last point, just to advance both languages in the country. And the Higher Council of Languages and Cultures could give recommendations, for example, to the Higher Council of Education and Scientific Research, which in turn should have a kind of a legislator, if you like, authority over the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research. In this way, every appointed minister will find himself working within a system, either to advance the project, okay, or just keep the flow of the project, instead of having such reforms which destabilize the entire educational system, right? Because to my mind, the last event, what happened in the bachelor system was unforgivable. Okay?
Time is up.
Thank you very much.
Now we move to our second speaker, Professor Jamal Bahmed, who will be talking about student perceptions of quality in Moroccan public higher education. The floor is yours, Professor Jamal Bahmed.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zdari. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, the paper is about, student perceptions of quality in Moroccan public higher education. And anybody who knows, my research will know that this is really a first. So I'm not saying that, this is a new major, okay, a research interest, but I just wanted really to look, because in Morocco and this morning we talked a lot about reform. And one thing that is often not taken into account is really student population's opinion, but also just perceptions, okay, of what quality means in the higher education system. And this is also very important to talk about in the case of public universities, because I know that, private universities today, they do their own, accreditation, like at Al-Akhwan University, they have an accreditation system, which is partly based also on student feedback. Private institutions, they do have some form of quality, like assurance. But in public universities, this, is still, not, a reality. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is actually read a paper which is based on field work with our students in the English department here in Rabat. Okay, so this is, outline of the presentation. I'm going to talk a bit about like the population that took place in survey, and then, about a few other things, but I'll stay on the outline, page for now. So, although the first university opened its doors in Morocco only a year after independence, and of course I'm talking about this institution, and most of the big universities came into existence over the next 2 to 3 decades, the evaluation of the quality of educational provision in Moroccan higher education institutions is a recent practice. In fact, the National Quality Assurance Agency was created as recently as 2014. The emergence and proliferation of private universities and semi-public universities over the last decade, over the last 2 decades, has been a game changer. Because students must pay tuition fees at these institutions, they are given a say in the evaluation of the educational offer, even if this is not yet a universal practice, and much road remains to be traveled before international standards of quality assurance and the overall evaluation of higher education institutions are followed in Morocco. The National Agency of Assessment and Quality Assurance in Higher Education and Scientific Research, more known by its French acronym ANIAC, was created in 2014. It's based in Rabat, and in this institution aims, and I'm quoting from its mission statement, to improve and to ensure quality, competitiveness, and diversity of training, to promote scientific research and adapt training to the labor market requirements in order to create an enabling environment to develop the Moroccan higher education and scientific research. End of quote. Whilst the creation of this institution clearly inscribes the Moroccan higher education system in the country's neoliberal political economy, ANIAC has not yet asked public and private institutions to create structures for measuring and acting on student feedback on the quality of the educational provision at their institutions. The agency so far is more focused on the accreditation of study programs and the assessment of research structures at Moroccan universities, both public and private. Student perceptions about quality in higher education, needless to say, are very important, and as we shall see later, they are affected by several factors, from the quality of teachers to facilities and support structures. The challenge is acute in Moroccan public universities because of the low budget allocated to the education sector in Morocco, in addition to other structural challenges. English departments in particular are often overcrowded with a high ratio of students per instructor. The rate starts from 34 students per instructor at our department in the Faculty of Letters and Humanities in Rabat, which has the highest number of academic staff, 31, 32, I guess, this year, because oftentimes like the instructors are retiring, others are coming in, but it's 32, I guess, this year. And we have the lowest number actually of first-year students as of the academic year like 2018-2019. However, the picture is gloomier outside of Rabat. For example, at the English department of the Faculty of Letters and Humanities at Ibn Zohar University in Agadir, the ratio has reached 587 students per teacher during the same period. With 4,783 students in the first year alone, 27 faculty members in Agadir are beyond overwhelmed. Although these numbers are not conducive to good quality in teaching, feedback, and supervision, there are other obstacles to ensuring that English department students at the Moroccan Public University get a good quality education. And this is what this paper set out to find out. So we set out to measure student perceptions of quality at the Moroccan Public University. 2 research instruments were used in this study. The first was a questionnaire with 15 statements about different aspects of higher education quality from a student perspective. The second instrument was qualitative and involved in-depth interviews with 2 randomly selected undergraduate students from the Department of English. The surveyed population consisted of current students in our undergraduate program, particularly the ongoing S2, S4, and S6 semesters, and our postgraduate students in the MA and doctoral programs. The population in this study, as you can see on this slide, consisted of 111 students, with 54 females and 54 males, which it's a big, kind of finding in itself. Like it's 50-50. Usually, like in surveys in the past, I usually get more female participation. One student chose not to reveal his or her gender, and 2 reported their gender as fluid or transgender, respectively. In terms of aged population, 53% of population was between the ages of 18 and 22, and the other half of population, study population, was 23 years or older. older. For the sake of narrowing down the focus of this conference paper, it was decided that we would deal with sample population of 68 undergraduate students only. A combination of undergraduate and postgraduate perceptions will be dealt with on another occasion. The table that you have here shows the study population by current semester of study. And in the questionnaire, which was created and distributed online via Google Forms, students had to look at 15 statements. So these are 15 statements that they had to read and then choose, on a scale of 5 options. Option 1, strongly agree, 2, agree, 3, neutral, then 4, disagree, and then 5, strongly disagree. And of course, these statements actually are, adopted and slightly adapted from an earlier study by Dicker, 2017. Yeah, and the results are, like in terms of first, the results once they were in, we proceeded with quantitative analysis using statistical tool, SPSS. And in screening the data, so the students' responses to the 15 statements in the questionnaire show internal inconsistency in measuring students' perceptions of Moroccan higher education, with a Cronbach alpha figure of 0.87, which translates into like an 87%, a rate of consistency. Let us now, in the second place, visualize the undergraduate student population's perceptions on higher educational provision. On the face of it, as is shown in the chart here, the students differ in the way they perceive higher education, okay, according to their academic level. Now, the idea is, the question is this difference superficial or is it really meaningful? So this is why, we conducted next, test, the ANOVA test, and this one revealed that, the groups, in this study are very homogeneous in the expression of their perceptions of higher education. And therefore, the ANOVA model has yielded a result of 0.20, 0.20, which is statistically insignificant. Then next stage was the post hoc, tests, and these show similar results among 3 groups. And no group actually among 3 that you see here, IS2, IS4, and IS6, differs from the other in the way higher education is perceived. So actually, the differences are very, insignificant in terms of quantitative analysis. So further quantitative analysis was conducted, and actually, like our first conclusion at this stage was that academic level does not seem to have an impact on the perceptions of students towards quality in higher education. Now, let us look at details of different types of perceptions, okay? So we paired, different, because, the statements were coded, okay, so that they belong to different categories, such as support, teaching and learning, facilities, and so on. So I'm limiting, like, the range now to just 3 pairs, where I compare, to very important, elements there. So, for example, the perceptions of teaching and learning, which came in student responses to statements 6, 11, 13, 14, and 15, versus perceptions about facilities in pair 1. Bearing in mind that the higher the mean, the mean value there, the higher it is, okay, actually the more negative the perception. So you can see there that actually student perceptions about, for example, teaching and learning, they are actually more negative than their perceptions about facilities. And that was very surprising, because I have always thought that maybe one thing that students would complain about in the first place is our facilities, okay? But it seems that, for students that comes in second or third place, vis-a-vis or versus like teaching and quality that they are getting. So it is interesting to, it seems that students think that there is not enough teaching quality and support, and they mind that more than the quality of the facilities, when our facilities are on a low par compared to other public and private institutions. Perhaps the students are comparing our facilities to other public institutions, or maybe to the public high schools that they graduated from, okay? But anyway, but still their expectations, their expectations about facilities seem to be very low. But if you try to compare their perceptions about facilities versus support, okay, and this came in question in the responses to statements 4, 5, and 12 in the pair 2 that you have there in the table, you can see again it's very interesting to see that facilities are ranked higher, than support, okay? So support still ranks higher than teaching and learning in the previous paired sample of statistical results, and this is confirmed also by peer through there in that table, where support is ranked higher than teaching and learning. It is evident that students think that they are not getting good quality in the areas of teaching and learning than in the areas of support and facilities. So in second phase of study, we conducted interviews with undergraduate students to qualify the results and findings of the quantitative analysis that I have discussed so far. So two randomly selected students from S4 and S6, so semester 4 and semester 6, respectively were chosen and were asked the following 5 questions. Question 1, what were your expectations of quality in higher education before becoming a university student? Question 2, talk about your experience of some quality elements in your university education so far. Question number 3, how can teachers ensure quality? Question 4, what can the government and universities do to promote quality? And last question, talk about your career prospects and whether the presence or lack of quality in your university education will help or hinder them. So now we go to student 1, and these are just extracts from the interview. So the first respondent is female student in her final semester of the undergraduate program. She studied science in high school. And like Professor Belhiyah said this morning, a lot of our students, they end in the department because they have very little choice about places, where to go for their studies. So she studied science in high school, but ended up in the English department because, quote, I wanted to go to an engineering school, but since my plans did not work, I just opted for the English studies, hoping that I will have, yes, I think I'll, yeah, okay. I'll have more time to think about what I'm going to do next. I even cried during the first days of my classes because they didn't want to be in this place. End of quote. However, she soon fell in love with the humanities because she had some good teachers. And actually, she's one of our best students, now. In response to the question about what the government and universities can do to improve quality in higher education, she lists several propositions. I'll leave you to read the propositions there, okay? Then student 2 is currently a second-year student in his semester 4 of study. In answer to the question about his expectations before joining the university, he relates how, quote, assumed that the Moroccan university would be like the American one, thanks to watching movies. I expected that I had just to be there in final exams, but the opposite happened. Some professors actually took attendance into consideration, end of quote. He says that his teachers have been mostly good, and that their teaching methods involved interaction with students. Asked about what instructors can do to ensure quality, he says, the best way that I think I can leave you also to read that one, to ensure quality is by introducing quality in the classroom and so on. The student also says in the interview that the government and the Moroccan government and universities can improve quality of their offer by A, hiring qualified teachers, 2, measuring students' performance, 3, and C, improving teaching methods in the classroom. In conclusion, this study shows a high level of student awareness across all levels about quality in higher education. Second, it also shows that students have low expectations when it comes to certain things like facilities, or it seems that they are not a priority for them, like vis-a-vis other elements in the educational offer, like teaching and learning. However, their expectations about teaching and learning are very high, and students are relatively not pleased with the educational provision in the areas of teaching and learning at the public university, or at least in the English department in Rabat. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Jamal, for sticking to the time. And policymakers seem to, maybe they had better listen to our students and hire more professors. Our next speaker is Professor Jmati from Ibn Zuhr University, and he's going to be talking about foreign languages as media of instruction in Morocco, attitudes to education, language policy, and the influence of ideology. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's very difficult to present after such a big meal. Anyway, I hope you would digest what I'm going to present. This presentation is a part of a large-scale study that was actually conducted by me and Professor Tremas and Professor Ghazi from the same institution. I have my presentation in the beginning will go as the following. So a quick background of the study, a statement of the problem, and then presenting the topic, which is language in education planning of foreign languages as a media of instruction, and how it has been conducted in Morocco so far, and then the research questions, and then yielding back to the methodology, the results, the finding, the major findings, and finally some couple of implications to policymakers. My colleague asked a question in the beginning about who is conducting or implementing or making decisions in Morocco. And I have to invite you, to Muhaz Najid 2005, in which he quoted also another study in which saying in the third world, generally language policy is arbitrary. It is characterized by arbitrariness. And so is the case in Morocco. We see that there are policies, there are activities that are made and then abrupted and then made and then abrupted and so on and so forth. We have also to agree on something that language policy does not occur in a vacuum. So it is ideologically oriented, whether we want it or not. So there is an influence of the ideology, and it's very difficult, as Professor Belhayah in the morning suggested, to depoliticize language policy in Morocco. It is very difficult to depoliticize it, but we can call for minimizing the effect of ideology. So the study was actually, the background of the study is going back to the debate over language, over the issue of foreign language and language policy in general in Morocco, and it dates back since Morocco got its independence. But the debate intensified recently when there was that shift towards language, towards foreign languages as media of instruction. And we've seen how many people are calling over social media and also in institutional forums towards adopting English or adopting French as media of instruction. This debate, or this societal debate, has been fueled by the following: internal and external changes that have impacted Morocco since 2000. At least my study, or our study actually, is focusing on the area between 2000 and 2018. Of course, with globalization, with the wars that have been gone, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and also the technological advances that are going on, and also in the field of science, most of publications are requiring English as a lingua franca for publication. Internally, also, there is this need to integrate in a domestic job market as well as an international job market, and also the need to call for foreign investment. So English also is very important for that. There is the successive implemented educational reforms which have been fluctuating. Most of these, or actually these reforms, incorporated several language in education planning which target foreign language education in general. And recently in the Strategic Vision 2015, there is a call for adopting foreign languages as medium of instruction. And we've seen that it being implemented in the Baccalauréat International, and also in what we call now le Baccalauréat Option Française, or Baccalauréat Option Anglaise. And then there is this language competition in Morocco, which is gradually being noticed between English and French. English is gaining ground in the linguistic scene in Morocco, and it's challenging French day after day. Okay, so there is I could claim that there is that covert war in Morocco going on in this perspective. As a primary, for the problem, so as a primary language policymaker, the Moroccan state claims or that it's only working to achieve equality of opportunity and the equality of educational system and provide a language quality for the learners, as well as achieving linguistic proficiency among the graduates in Morocco. This is the overt goal, okay? But on the other side, we said that we are talking about ideology. There are overt agendas that we will never probably know. I'm not accusing here the authorities or language policymakers, but whether we want it or not, Skiffman 1996 talks about covert and overt language ideologies. The Moroccan state's language and education planning activities, and by the way, language and education planning activities is a term coined by Cooper in 1989 as acquisition planning. So any language planning that is that targets planning language at the level of education. It can be also called acquisition planning or educational language policy. So the Moroccan state's language and education planning activities and their implementation manifest historical, political, economic connections which have been disregarding the bottom-up attitudes. So throughout all the reforms, the government have never tried to understand what are the attitudes of students, what are the attitudes of parents, what are the attitudes of teachers, educators in general regarding language, the language choice first, about foreign language choice, whether they want English or French, and also it disregarded that. So even if there are voices talking here and there, I mean, it neglected them totally. And this would undermine the success of any language policy activity at the level of education. It will lead it to failure, as Wiley and Garcia stated. This communication is a part, as I stated, of a historical structural analysis of the language and education planning of foreign languages in Morocco during the period of 2018, based on the historical structural approach suggested by Tollefson 1991. Part of the study investigated the attitudes of human agency of towards educational language planning. And here by human agency, I mean all the stakeholders I mentioned earlier, so parents, educators, and students, towards the foreign language in general, taught at the level of education in Morocco, but specifically also about the use of or the adoption of foreign languages as media of instruction. Education is a mechanism for expanding a polity language choice. Discursively, it is used to create linguistic and socio-economic inequality and class stratification. In some cases, the foreign language can be used as a gatekeeping to integrate a certain social class, like the way it's used here for French. And there, it undermines socio-economic mobility. Therefore, the Moroccan Francophone elite employed language in education planning to sustain French and perpetuate socio-economic and ideological dominance and linguistic inequality. The choice of French as medium of instruction, as an example here, the adoption of the choice of French as a medium of instruction for the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, now at all the levels of the educational system. Educational language policymakers, as I said, often disregard bottom-up attitudes. And therefore, the following are the research questions for this study. So what are the attitudes of Moroccan students, parents, teachers, and supervisors towards language in education planning regarding foreign languages as media of instruction? And number two, do these attitudes between these groups differ? Okay, do we have any kind of a difference in attitudes? For the research methodology, now for all the study, a sequential exploratory design was adopted for the multi-perspective study. And then part of the design is investigating the attitude, so it's a quantitative analysis was used, a quantitative approach was used for collecting and analyzing the data using a semi-structured questionnaire, which based on Likert question, 5-scale Likert questions. For the sampling, non-random sampling was used using a sample size of 539 divided on the 4 groups based on the maximum variation sampling and convenience sampling. For the instruments, the analysis of the internal coefficient of internal consistency for the questionnaires distributed to teachers, students, inspectors, and parents indicated that generally the alpha internal coefficient of internal consistency exceeds 0.75, which in human sizes indicates that it's a good internal consistency. The data analysis used inferential statistics with a comparison of the means of the 4 groups using the one-way analysis where the level of significance was set at, sorry, there's a mistake there, it's 0.05, okay? Not 0.01. They try to identify the different groups post hoc tests used, so Taki's HSD post hoc to identify the different group or the different groups. This is an example of the sample size and gender representation in the group. Okay. So in general, for the participants' attitudes to foreign languages for science school subjects as medium of instruction, French, there was a statistically significant difference between the groups of teachers and other groups, where teachers unfavored using French as medium of instruction, whereas for English, there was a statistically significant difference between students and parents, between both students on the one side and parents and teachers on the other sides, where students were unfavorable to English as media of instruction. So actually they asked for a balance between the 2 languages because they still perceive that French is an instrumental language for social mobility and integrating the job market at the current time. For participant attitudes to language and education planning foreign languages in Morocco and their impact on socio-economic inequality. So based on or trying to investigate their attitude, the participants' attitudes towards the issues of language policy of foreign languages and ideology, social class inequalities, power, foreign language status, social classes influence on language orientation. There was no statistically significant difference between groups as estimated at p.0.09. For the major findings, Moroccan, the participants still consider the instrumental role of French in their socio-economic mobility. Instead, there is a growing interest in English, which shows the challenge English has been imposing on French lately in the Moroccan language space. Participants hold a negative attitudes towards the language of education planning of French. They perceive its instrumental role in sustaining the ideology and the socio-economic power of the dominant elite, while they perceived encouraging language and education planning of English as an opportunity to establish a balance and to establish socio-economic and linguistic justice. Finally, some implications drawn from this study at the level of policy. The state is encouraged to balance its political and economic interests of upholding French and promoting English status to a higher status in the Moroccan educational system at the level of media of instruction if we are determined to go in the direction of adopting foreign languages as media of instruction. And then the state is urged to review its unilateral top-down language and education planning, allowing for voices at the level of the bottom to express themselves and consider those views and those attitudes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And the next presentation by Professor Al-Khaima will narrow the scope into MI, English as a medium of instruction. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, distinguished professors, teachers, and students. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm quite honored that I'm here to share with you my perspective on this innovative pedagogical approach that is medium English as a medium of instruction. Actually, I thought about this this topic when I asked my S4 students at ENSAM whether they like to study French, they like to study engineering in French, and whether they or how they feel about studying engineering in French. So most of them want English, and actually, I noticed that their quick answers, quick opinions, reflected an inner dissatisfaction with French as a language of instruction at ENSAM in their engineering subject. So, without further ado, let me share with you my outline. I'm going to introduce the topic and hopefully provide a clear definition of English as a medium of instruction, and then highlights the status of MI, English as a medium of instruction, MI in the world and in our country, and then share with you some few reasons behind the MI growing, and then explore the major benefits and challenges surrounding the use and the implementation of MI. And I will conclude with further remarks, actually. So many countries actually around the world have long decided to adopt English as a medium of instruction in higher education. There are many reasons behind this choice. The most notable one is their strong willingness to develop the quality of their students' academic performance and the quality of education they offer to students. And we will come to the reasons, as I have just said, in the course of this presentation. What is English as a medium of instruction? Is it the use of English to teach English? Actually, it is the use of English to teach academic subjects apart from the English language in non-native English-speaking contexts or countries, where English can be a foreign language, like the case in Morocco, or where English is a lingua franca or a lingua, cultural means of communication, as in most of Europe, parts of Asia, parts of Africa, and even parts of North America. So the status of MI in the world actually is quite prevalent. So as you can see, through the three examples I'm citing here, of Germany, the Netherlands, and France, most colleges in these countries, and in others in Europe, like Sweden, Finland, most colleges actually provide English taught programs to their local students and even to international students. Even in France, which is our mythical role model in education, and this is actually a very practical example. In most French engineering schools, the main language of instruction is English. Whereas in our engineering schools, the de facto language of instruction is French, even if most of our engineering students, at least in the institution where I work, prefer English over French. The status in Asia is quite similar to that of Europe, namely in countries like Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and even in China. I mean, China, the world's biggest former socialist country, has become now the major Asian destination for students wishing to conduct and to continue their higher education, even in English, in China. In our Moroccan context, we all know that English is quite popular, at least among the educated and the young generations today. But its official use is still limited. And the most English taught subjects courses are provided by private higher institutions, whereas in the public institutions, in public universities, there are a few exceptions that appear from time to time. As the, I mean, we cannot take Al-Akhawa University as an example. It's only an exception. There are a few exceptions that appear from time to time, like the previously announced project of a bachelor's degree in economics and business administration, launched by the Faculty of Legal, Economic and Social Sciences in Aishaq of Casablanca. But however, with the new reform that has come to be released by the Minister of Higher Education, and that requires our university students to achieve a particular level of proficiency in English in order to graduate, this new reform will hopefully be the first step towards a broader implementation of MI and replacement of French by English, at least in science and engineering schools. So why is English as a medium of instruction is growing in the world? So the first obvious reason is that English is the dominant language in the world. So it is the world's lingua franca, the language of business, technology, science, the media, the internet, and the language of communication, international communication. The second reason is that there is a fierce competition among international universities to gain some advantages from this globalized higher education, because higher education nowadays has become very globalized with the rapid flow of knowledge from university to another, from a country to another. The third reason is that most universities, again, around the world, work on internationalizing their campuses by attracting diverse students from different linguistic and cultural backgrounds in order to help their local students develop the international communication and also improve their cultural competence and awareness. So there are a lot of benefits, of course, I mean, that pushed these many countries around the world to implement English as a medium of instruction. So there are benefits for students, for instructors or teachers, and even for institutions themselves. So for students, I mean, since they learn their academic subjects, apart from English, we're not talking about English, since they learn their academic subject in English, their level of proficiency in English obviously develops. And even the learning content itself that they learn can also be globalized, being similar to what other students in international universities learn. And this also, I mean, this automatically helps them develop their academic performance. And also they become, with the use of English and with the access, the unlimited access they have to research resources and learning material in English, they become more innovative and more creative. And for that matter, their employability increases since they have been taught in English. For instructors, since they teach in English, also their level of proficiency develops, and English allows them, I mean, instructors in particularly in science and in science, business, and engineering schools, their level of proficiency develops, and with the use of English, they can publish in academic journals, reaching out to the international audiences, and they can also participate in international conferences. And with all of this, they can achieve professional development and even get better job opportunities as professors and teachers or instructors for that matter. For institutions, once they introduce English taught programs, they can attract foreign students coming from all over the world, and this is something that really increases their income and makes their campuses more internationalized. And we all know that most international universities compete over international ranking. With English taught programs, they can achieve that. So there are challenges surrounding the use and the implementation of English taught programs or English as a medium of instruction. The most prominent one is the insufficient level of proficiency among instructors and even students. So, because those instructors are not language teachers, they are content teachers. With the lack of English proficiency, they may find difficulty explaining the course content, and they may fail to maintain communication with their students, for that matter. Another challenge is related to students. So not all students have a sufficient level of English proficiency. Some of them lack this English proficiency, which may make them demotivated and lose self-esteem, for that matter, since they cannot follow, cannot understand, and cannot communicate. Others argue that the more we introduce English as a medium of instruction or English taught programs in our countries, the more we lose our national identity and our national languages. This is something actually that hasn't been endorsed by research so far. So it might not be true.
2 minutes before time, please.
I'm sorry?
It's almost time to conclude.
Oh, all right, thank you. So I'm going to conclude. This is the last one. So in conclusion, MI is as a new trend and as an innovative pedagogical approach is becoming more and more popular in the world. So in our Moroccan context, we can implement it by bringing foreign language teachers and content teachers together to work, to collaborate in order to best assess student academic performance. Because the MI teachers are not language teachers, so some of them cannot assess language-related areas among their students. And also the new reform that has come to be released by the ministry can be also a model for implementing this, the MI in Morocco, because this reform requires students to achieve a particular level of proficiency, and once our students achieve that, then we can embark on the MI implementation. We just need the political will. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Now we will take questions from the floor. We'll take names, then we will answer the questions at the end. So any questions, please? Yes, please. So Layadi. Right. غني عن التعريف. Anyone else? So any question to any of the speakers? Your name, please? Fedwa. Right. Do you have the mic? Yes, please. Any?
Especially lots of candidates. We need
Yeah.
to
Ammar. Any other questions? All right. So we'll take these questions now. So, Professor Ayadi.
I would like to thank you so much for your insightful and informative presentations. Thank you so much. Briefly, I have two questions. First one is addressed to the honorable professors, Professor Bahman and Professor Shmati. I'm just wondering whether you included, this is a question that is relevant to the methodology you adopted in your research. I missed the hypothesis testing section, so I was wondering whether you actually included it in your sections and the null and the alternative hypotheses. I would like just to report a little bit on those, if you don't mind. My second question is addressed to Professor Khaima. During your presentation, it seemed like, I don't know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like as if you were trying to prompt us to sort of buy into this agenda of EMI, English as a medium of instruction. We all know that it is pretty established in the literature that education that is enacted and effected using the L1 is more effective and more efficient. And the norms of education should shift in countries where there is a multitude of languages adopted. So we are still in a mess in a way. The scene is chaotic. We can't figure out which one we're supposed to, to decide to settle on as a language of instruction. Thank you so much. So I would like you to elaborate on this if you don't mind. Thank you.
We take Fadwa. So please be brief so that we have some time for the answers.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank all the presenters for their insightful presentations. So, to be brief, I will say that I am also working on the language of instruction, but this time in the high school level. So I have already conducted an investigation on high school science students about their attitudes towards the use of English as a means of instruction for the teaching of the scientific subject they have at high school. So the general finding is that almost all students agreed on using English as a means of instruction, but they have shown, let's say, hesitation or, let's say, they show that they are not really equipped with the linguistic matter to have these subjects taught in English. So maybe my question here is, yes, we have first I think it's a good thing to have the voice of part of the learning or the teaching process, which are students. So maybe this attitude should be taken into consideration in future, let's say, language policies. And maybe it should, the language of instruction, not only English but also French, they have admitted that they suffer in using the language. And maybe here the question is, shall we, or is it a high time to look at the methodologies in which languages, be it Arabic or French or English, should they be revisited, reconsidered, because there is a problem in what concerns the language proficiency of the students.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So Ammar, yes, please. Please be brief, Ammar. And by brief, I mean brief.
Yeah, thank you, dear professors, for your insightful presentation. My question is direct to the point. The first question for Dr. Zakher. Do the reforms that take place bring some positive changes to the education system? And my second question to the Professor Bahmed. Can we reach the objectives of the course with crowded classes? If no, what are the alternative ways to achieve course objectives? Thank you.
Thank you. Answers in the order of the presentation. Sir Ahmed.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Do reforms bring positive change to education? Of course. Yeah, there are many positive things in all these reforms. But the problem we have is we do not have a clear vision concerning our language policy in education. And every minister attempts to, defend his project. We have Mirawi, Francophone minister. We have Amzazi, who is more inclined to the Anglo-Saxon world. So this will not serve students and the development of our education system. We need to have a clear view of what we need, right? That's why I mentioned the importance of different institutions in Morocco, okay? If we have an institute which has a kind of legitimate or, legislator authority over ministries, we will not have such kind of, reforms which reforms, right? So we need to have a clear view of what we need, right, so as to advance our education system. The problem of education in Morocco, of course, is not limited to languages, right? It's also, it has to do with access to education itself. The education provided, for example, here in Rabat is not the same as in other cities, in other mountains, and so on and so forth. So this is my point. We need to collaborate, okay, all institutes, all social actors, politicians, right, to advance this project of education. And thank you.
Thank you. Professor Ahmed.
Yes, thank you, Professor Ayadi, for your question. There is no hypothesis in this paper. It's just an exploratory study that started with 15 statements, adopted from a study that was carried out in the UK in 2016, the results of which were published, the following year. And the expectation was that, student expectations in Morocco at a public university would be, radically different from those of students in the UK, given like different social, economic contexts and so on. But actually, the revelation was that they are very, very similar because the market pressure seems to be the same and it's mounting on Moroccan students. So now they think when they go to university, maybe for your generation, when you went to university, you want there to be transformed, to explore new worlds and so on and so forth. Now students are more, concerned with their careers and so on. So their expectations of, quality, reflect that. Yeah, I think there was one more question about achieving like course objectives in context of crowded classrooms and so on. I think this is a question that is bigger than me. I think, yeah, we know there are so many structural problems at the Moroccan University, but the biggest one, in my opinion, is really about like this ratio of like students per teacher, per instructor. It's just outrageous, okay? Our departments, our universities, departments of English, they are very understaffed. So it's very difficult, when you are like in two different situations. Like when you have 20, 40 students, and then when you are teaching a group of like 200 students or more, it's very, very difficult. But you can you can do your best, okay? Like a lot of teachers, and actually some of the interviews that I did, they revealed that, teachers are doing their best, and oftentimes, students are very satisfied with the outcome. I think solutions is one. It's one of staffing in first place, okay? And then we can also, I think, maybe need also to upgrade teaching methods. One of the students suggested that. I think using more technology, using more maybe a hybrid style of teaching, a combination of online, offline, and so on and so forth. Well, I think it's all starts with staffing. I think for me that is the biggest problem, that we have, and that is what, is really a big obstacle to achieving, course objectives.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed.
Thank you for the question. As I said when I was explaining the design of the study, it's only a part of a large-scale sequential exploratory design. where one part of the study is a historical analysis of all the documents issued by different stakeholders, including the Higher Educational Council and Training, the Ministry of Education, and also the reports done by internal and international institutions regarding the language policy in education in Morocco. From that design, from that analysis, certain factors were actually drawn, and then they were used in the questionnaire to examine the students, the participants' attitudes towards those factors. They are history, power, class, and socioeconomic status. The two questions that you have seen in the PowerPoint are only a deconstruction of one research question, so that's why there was no research hypothesis. It's exploratory, okay, so there's no need for the comparison there was not to identify for another specific purpose, to correlate or something like that. Okay, so it was only done to have an insight about how Moroccans in general, including the participants in study, think about the issue of language in education of foreign languages as media of instruction in general. In the study, there was a recommendation for experimental design, okay, to understand more about the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we move on to Professor Al-Khaima.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your thank you, Professor, for your question and comment. I agree with you. We are still in a mess. We still don't know what to follow: French, English, or Arabic. But only African countries like us are the ones that are still in a mess. Most world countries, successful stories in education, like Western Europe, like most Asian countries, have already decided to develop their students' academic performance and the quality of their education system at large. So using the words first language, this is one step and an important step in getting involved in this globalized higher education, because higher education nowadays has become globalized. It's no longer localized or national. It has become internationalized. So, given the various reasons, benefits that we can draw from the implementation of English taught programs in our at least in our science and business engineering schools, surely the level of our higher education, the quality of our higher education certainly improves in research. If you look at the examples in engineering schools or science schools, professors there struggle to innovate their research. They struggle with the language. They try hard to publish in English and try hard to speak English in international conferences. Why? Because they are heavily influenced by French. If they are not heavily influenced by French is imposed on them because our education in Morocco is heavily politicized. When once we are done with politics in education, then our education will certainly develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Now our first panel has come to a close. I think we'll take a break before we have the second panel, a coffee break. Right? Yeah.